Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to finally bring you my third quarter book haul. I'll be honest, I've been putting off doing this haul because it's a lot of work and also because the book buying got pretty intense there for the hottest of seconds. But this is going to cover everything from July till just before October, and since there's a lot of stuff to go through, I'm just going to jump right in. This first book I found on sale when I was on vacation visiting my sister, and that is The Rest of the Story by Sarah Dessen. It's about Emma, whose mother has passed away, and now she's been suddenly invited to spend some time with her mom's side of the family in a town called North Lake. I assume it's about discovering lost pieces of her mom's life and discovering her own first love, and I'm hoping it's finally another amazing Sarah Dessen book. Then I got the Barnes & Noble edition of Wilder Girls by Rory Power, which I know is one of Brody's new favorite books. This is like queer sci-fi inspired by Lord of the Flies. It's supposed to be a creepy story about a school that's been put under quarantine in response to a plague known as the Tox. First it wiped out the teachers, and now the students have to fend for themselves. I believe the main character's best friend goes missing, and that's when the protagonist decides to break quarantine and finally venture beyond the fence. After reading and loving The Unhoneymooners, I decided to get Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. This is a romance, and I think it's about these two college friends who have very different personalities, and ever since they met, they've been setting each other up on a series of progressively horrible blind dates. But now, 10 years later, after Josh has just broken up with a cheating ex, it does occur to him that maybe it's time for him and Hazel to date. Up next, I of course pre-ordered the Barnes & Noble edition of The Adventure Zone, Murder on the Rockport Limited, written by the McElboys and illustrated by Carrie Peach. I gushed about this in my Reading Rush vlog. It is the second graphic novel adaptation of the Adventure Zone podcast, and if you enjoy role-playing games and fantasy with a hefty side of comedy and heart, then you definitely need to be reading this. Then sadly, because Less Than 3 Press was going under, I immediately sprung for a hard copy of one of my favorite queer books, The Trouble by Daria Dufour, because there's really no telling if it's going to be back in print. This is an Own Voices queer story about Danny, the frontman of a Seattle rock band who is also Korean American, I believe, and a romantic. One night after a gig, he tries to come on to this really hot guy and totally embarrasses himself, only to realize that it's the TA for his accounting class, which is not a great look. Then also around the time of the Reading Rush, you may recall my getting The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is one of my favorite books of the year. It's a queer historical romance about Lucy, who's an aspiring astronomer in a field that does not respect women's work, and the recently widowed Countess of Moth, who is looking for someone to translate her late husband's astronomy research. By a twist of fate and a little bit of manipulation, they cross paths and a romance ensues. Then I was kindly sent an arc of Frankly in Love by David Yoon from the folks at Penguin Teen. This is an Own Voices contemporary coming-of-age story about a Korean-American boy named Frank Lee who feels caught between two cultures and pretends to date a family friend so that he can date a non-parent approved girl who happens to be white. I would personally say it's less about fake dating and more about family and confronting internalized racism and biases, but that's just what I think. Then I got myself the UK edition of The True Queen by Zen Cho. This is a fantasy of manners about a queer Malaysian woman named Mona who wakes up on a deserted island with her sister Saki, and the only thing they can remember is that they have been cursed. Also, Saki is starting to fade out of existence, and so they make their way to the Sorceress Royal in Britain, who specializes in teaching young ladies magic. Then I collected both volumes 20 and 21 of My Hero Academia or Boku no Hero Academia by Horikoshi Kohei. Generally speaking, the series is set in a world where almost everyone has powers or quirks except for our main character Midoriya, who was born quirkless. One day, his #1 favorite hero passes down his legendary power to Midoriya, allowing him to attend the absolute best hero school in existence. And yes, I am currently streaming season 4 and it's making me emo as heck. Then for my August book of the month, I chose Well Met by Jen DeLuca, which was honestly the best possible choice I could have made for myself. This is an incredible, fun, sweet romance about Emily, who moves back to her small town to help watch her niece as her sister recovers from a car accident, and her niece wants to volunteer for the local Renaissance fair, except she has to apply with an adult. So Emily finds herself cast as a tavern wench, and also when she's in character, she's being courted by a dashing pirate played by a fellow volunteer who doesn't really talk to her much on a day-to-day basis. It is great, and I super recommend it. Then I was on the hunt for more romances, and I came across Say You Still Love Me by K.A. Tucker. This is a second chance romance, I believe, about Piper, who works for her dad's high-powered real estate firm even though she doesn't really enjoy the work, and she runs into a new security guard who happens to be the first ever love of her life. Apparently, they were both camp counselors together many years ago and possibly had a summer romance, and this is an opportunity for them to reconnect. Then Penguin also sent me an arc of The Beautiful by Renee Attier. This is a historical supernatural story that takes place in New Orleans, where Celine has just fled her past as a dressmaker in Paris, only to find herself drawn into the city's glitzy and glamorous underworld with a group called the Cour de Lion. She is trying to lay low in a convent when the girls around her start to mysteriously die in bloody and horrific ways, and it seems like the investigation keeps leading back to the court. Then, of course, being the gay I am, I had to get Fence Volume 3 by Joanna the Mad and C.S. Picat. This is a super queer sports comic about a scrappy young fencer, Nicholas Cox, who's attending King's Row as a fencing scholarship student. But first he has to actually make it on the team and battle it out against his privileged elite classmates while also coming face to face with his rival, Seiji, when they are assigned as roommates. My September book of the month pick was Dominicana by Angie Cruz, which came highly recommended by Jessie of Bowties and Books. This is an Own Voices Afro-Latinx story about Ana Cancion, who is uprooted from the Dominican Republic at 15 years old when her family promises her to a young entrepreneur named Juan Reese, who marries her and moves her to New York. There she is pretty much alone, and she's expected to stick it out until the rest of her family can immigrate to the States, so she has to learn how to adapt and provide for herself. Then I went to Orlando for BookNet Fest, and I went shopping with my NB crew, and I bought 2 books, the first of which was Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. This is an Own Voices contemporary story about a Persian-American teenager, Darius, who speaks better Klingon than Farsi and is facing his first ever trip to Iran while also dealing with his diagnosis of clinical depression. While abroad, he gets to know some of his distant family members, but he also meets a boy next door named Sorab, who may just change everything for Darius. Then on Kathy's recommendation, I also picked up the paperback edition of An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. From what I know, it's a YA story with a sci-fi twist about April, who finds this weird statue that wasn't there before, makes a video about it, posts it on social media, and becomes a viral sensation overnight. Turns out there's tons of these statues known as the Carls everywhere across the world, and April finds herself dealing with online fame and the weight of being the first person to document these statues as everyone tries to understand where the Carls came from and what they want from us. After I came home from BNF, I had to get a finished copy of Cantatas by Carolina de Robertes. I have talked about this book all over the internet, especially in my 5 Reasons to Read video. It is an Own Voices queer Latinx story centering the narratives of 5 queer women in Uruguay when it was not even legal to be queer, and it follows them as they try to create a safe space in the world and try to understand how to love each other and themselves. Then, mostly because of Melanie, I had pre-ordered Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is like badass queer sci-fi, I guess, about lesbian necromancers in space, and the main character is a reanimated corpse. I think there's supposed to be some kind of epic competition or tournament for the Emperor to find new necromancers, and Gideon tags along as someone's cavalier because of her sword skills, and I'm pretty sure hell itself is unleashed. After that, I had requested an arc of Dark and Deepest Red by Anna Marie McLemore. This is their upcoming January release. Its Own Voices queer Latinx magical realism set over dual timelines that explores this mysterious plague or curse that causes people to dance themselves to death, and its strange connection with these possibly magical shoes. Then, because I could not stop thinking about it, I had to get The Rise of Avatar Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. This is a canon novelization that follows Avatar Kyoshi, the longest living avatar who not only established the infamous Kyoshi warriors, but also founded a secret organization known as the Dai Li, which would eventually lead to the downfall and destruction of her own nation. But I believe this story follows her before all that happens and as she's just beginning to make those choices, and also it's queer as heck. Then from the second Njeri name dropped it at BNF, I pre-ordered my own copy of The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Janata Petrus. This is an Own Voices queer black YA coming-of-age narrative about Audrey, who lives in Trinidad and was caught with her girlfriend by her mom, who is super religious. So she is sent to live with family in Minneapolis, where she meets Mabel, who's trying to figure out how she feels about her ex-boyfriend and a moment she had with a girl in the woods, and after being thrown together, the two of them begin to connect. Then we have a book I found on sale that I recently read and loved, and that is Mercy Suarez Changes Gears by Meg Medina. This is an award-winning Own Voices middle grade story about Mercy, whose big Cuban family all lives on the same street, and she is also a scholarship student at her school where she has to do extra community service to make up for the tuition difference. So because of that, she has to be a mentor and friend to a new kid at school, and at home she's also dealing with her abuelo, Lolo, being more and more forgetful and mysteriously becoming more prone to small accidents. Then on a whim, I picked up a hard copy of Pan's Labyrinth Labyrinth, based off the screenplay by Guillermo del Toro and adapted by Cornelia Funke. This is a novelization of the film, which I love, and is set in 1944 Spain, where the main character Ofelia lives with her stepfather, a ruthless commander in the Spanish army, and her mother, who is pregnant and falling prey to a mysterious illness. During the night, Ofelia finds herself drawn to this otherworldly deity and his labyrinth, and this creature tells her that she is a lost princess who can only take her rightful place in her kingdom if she first completes 3 tasks. And finally, shout out to my lovely and generous friend McKinley for passing along this arc of Tarnished Are the Stars by Rosie Thor. This is an Own Voices queer sci-fi story about Anna Thatcher, who has an illegal mechanical heart beating in her chest, and she works as a technician to supply black market tech to those in need. The commissioner's son Nathaniel begins pursuing Anna to win over his father's trust, but the two end up becoming unlikely allies when they have to band together to end an epidemic before the commissioner can end them first. And I'm pretty sure one of the characters is asexual and aromantic. So finally, those are all the books I collected between July and October. As always, if you read any of these books yourself, or if any of these books have caught your eye specifically, feel free to drop a line in the comments below and we can discuss. But that's everything I have for this book haul today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the flip side of the page.